It's funny. People spend their whole lives waiting for some grand sign, some heavenly tap on the shoulder, some voice in the clouds whispering, "Hey, you, yes, you, this is your moment." But signs don't always arrive wrapped in golden light. Sometimes they come disguised as consequences, as warnings, as that quiet little shiver crawling up your spine when you're about to do something you know the world won't forgive. And isn't it fascinating how the universe, or whatever you want to call it, reaches out exactly when you think no one's watching? The moment you're standing on the edge of a choice that can flip your whole life upside down. People like to pretend they're free, that they can do anything they want, that there's no invisible finger wagging in their direction, until suddenly there is. And the funny part is, that finger doesn't always show up to guide you toward the light. Sometimes it appears simply to remind you that every action has a price, and some prices come with handcuffs. But oh, how powerful it is when you realize that the warning itself is a gift, a chance, a moment where something greater than you is saying, "Turn around. Don't throw your life away. You're meant for more than this." Most people don't recognize that kind of intervention because it doesn't look holy or beautiful or miraculous. It looks inconvenient. It looks uncomfortable. It looks like the world tightening its grip around your wrist before you drag yourself somewhere you were never meant to go. And yet that's the moment you should lean in, listen closely, because that's when you discover that being stopped isn't always a curse. Sometimes it's the universe pulling you back from the fire you thought you could walk through without getting burned. Ever notice how people treat warnings like background noise? Like a distant siren on the other side of the city, annoying, irrelevant, someone else's problem. They walk through life with this strange confidence that nothing bad could possibly happen to them because they are smart, they are careful, they are different. But the truth is, warnings don't show up for decoration. They don't appear because the universe is bored or because fate wants to play dress-up. Warnings show up when you're drifting just close enough to the edge for the ground to shake beneath your feet. They're not there to entertain you. They're there to save you from yourself. And isn't that a delicious little irony? The biggest threat to your life is rarely the world outside. It's the decisions you make when you think no one is watching. You see, people love the idea of being unstoppable. They cling to it like a shiny little badge of honor. I can handle it. I know what I'm doing. Nothing will happen. I'm in control. But control is a fragile illusion. One wrong step, one impulsive decision, one moment where emotion overrides reason, and suddenly you're dangling over a cliff you didn't even notice was there. And just before you tip over the edge, something whispers in the back of your mind, something subtle, something soft. Don't do this. A warning. A lifeline. A final attempt from the universe to keep you from becoming your own disaster. But humans are funny. They think warnings are obstacles instead of opportunities. Instead of listening, they push harder. They test limits just to see how far they can bend reality without breaking it. They ignore that voice, that instinct, that tug in the chest that says something isn't right. And when someone tries to stop them, when rules, consequences, or authority step in, they don't see it as protection. Oh no, they see it as interference, injustice, some grand conspiracy holding them back. They never consider that maybe, just maybe, they were about to walk straight into a life-ruining moment that would have swallowed them whole. Imagine this. You're standing at a door you're not supposed to open. It's tempting. It's dangerous. It's forbidden. Your hand is already reaching for the handle, and suddenly a warning flashes, maybe a voice, a law, a threat, a feeling crawling down your spine. Most people think that's the universe scaring them. But what if it's actually saving them? What if that warning is the only thing standing between you and a version of yourself you would never recover from? People say they want signs from above, but when the sign comes tangled in fear or consequences, they call it bad luck. They never realize it was protection wearing an unpleasant mask. Think about the last time something told you not to go further. Maybe it was your conscience. Maybe it was a person who cared. Maybe it was a rule you hated. Or maybe it was the simple thought that if you keep going, you won't like the person you become on the other side. That moment, right there, is the universe reaching out, not general. Sly, not beautifully, but honestly. Because real warnings don't arrive wrapped in soft music and divine sparkle. They come in the form of tension in your chest, a police siren in the distance, a consequence outlined in black and white, a threat that shakes you awake. People say they want enlightenment, but sometimes enlightenment is just realizing you're about to destroy your own future and the world is giving you one last chance to step back. You'd be amazed how many lives have been saved by a moment of hesitation, how many futures were protected by the discomfort of being told stop, how many disasters never happened because the universe cared enough to make someone feel scared at exactly the right time. Fear isn't always the enemy. Sometimes fear is the hand pulling you out of the fire before you burn everything you could have become. Sometimes fear is the last whisper of destiny saying, turn around. This isn't strength. This is self-destruction disguised as bravery. And the tragic part is that so many people misinterpret that gift. They think they're being punished when they're actually being protected. They think the world is against them when the world is trying desperately to keep them from collapsing into their own choices. Warnings aren't insults. They aren't threats. They aren't chains. They're lifelines thrown by destiny, fate, God, the universe, whatever you decide to call that strange force that nudges you away from the path you aren't built to survive. The only question is whether you listen or whether you march forward pretending you're invincible until the price finally comes. Do people spend their whole lives begging for signs? They look up at the sky, whispering for clarity, praying for guidance, waiting for some majestic voice to roll down from the clouds and tell them what to do. But the universe isn't some gentle storyteller handing out poetic hints. No. It speaks through something much louder, much sharper, much harder to ignore. It speaks through consequences. And isn't it strange how people treat those consequences like accidents? Like random punishments from a cruel world? They never stop to consider that the consequences are the message, the warning, the lesson, the sign they claim to be waiting for. People like clean miracles, sweet little moments wrapped in light and hope. But real signs rarely come wrapped in gold. They arrive, dressed as mistakes, losses, threats, alarms blaring in the distance. They come in the form of, if you do this, you will regret it, or if you cross that line, you won't like what follows. But instead of listening, people pretend the universe speaks a language they can't understand. They act surprised when punishment steps in wearing steel cuffs, or a stern voice, or a cold, unmistakable price tag. They gasp, they panic, they cry out, "Why me?" As if the world hadn't been shouting the answer long before the consequences arrived. It's almost amusing, really. Humans ignore the gentle signs and then complain when the message comes wrapped in something they can't walk away from. They walk around with this illusion of invincibility. They convince themselves they can outrun the fallout, outsmart the rules, outplay the very system that shaped them. But consequences are patient. They sit in the shadows, waiting for that perfect moment. And when it comes, it comes with precision. Not because the universe wants to hurt you, but because it wants to make sure the message gets through this time. Imagine someone stepping toward a path everyone knows will end badly. The warnings are there, the laws, the risks, the inner voice tightening in their gut. But they brush it off with a laugh. They think consequences only happen to other people, unlucky people, foolish people, the ones who deserve it. And then, when the trap finally snaps shut, they stare at it like it dropped out of the sky, as if it wasn't there the whole time, as if the world hadn't been pointing at it like a neon sign saying, "Turn back while you still can." You see, consequences aren't random punishments, they're communication. The world doesn't always talk in whispers, it talks in cause and effect. It talks through your actions, bouncing back at you with perfect accuracy. You decide to ignore the warning, and the universe responds by giving you exactly what you signed up for. Not out of cruelty, but out of clarity. It's the purest kind of honesty. Cold, hard, unavoidable honesty. And there's something almost admirable about that. Something clean, something fair. Because the universe may be chaotic, but consequences, they're organized, they're dependable. They show up on time, they never forget an appointment. People like to pretend consequences are unfair, but what's unfair about getting exactly what you push toward? The message doesn't get more obvious than that. You steal something, someone notices. You break a rule, someone enforces it. You take a step that crosses the line pushes back. And every pushback is a sign you refused to hear earlier. Every repercussion is the universe raising its voice because you didn't listen the first time, or the second, or the 100th. Even guilt is a consequence. That sinking feeling in your chest, that's the inner voice reminding you you're not built for the path you're forcing yourself down. That discomfort you feel before doing something wrong, that's not weakness, it's a message, a warning, a preview of the regret waiting on the other side. But people shove it down and call it overthinking. They ignore the alarm and then act blindsided when the fallout arrives. It's almost poetic how humans create their own storms and then complain about the rain. And you know what makes consequences the loudest sign of all? You can't negotiate with them. You can't charm them, outrun them, or talk your way out of them. They don't care about your excuses, your intentions, your reasons. They care about your choices. And choices have echoes. They travel far. They return stronger. They return louder. They return as the very signs people pretend they never received. When you look closely, you'll realize consequences aren't against you. They aren't out to destroy you. They're simply trying to teach you the lesson you refuse to learn gently, because the universe may whisper first. But when you ignore the whisper, it always sends the echo back with a punch. There's a moment just before. A choice breaks you when the world seems quieter than usual. It's almost as if the universe is holding its breath, watching to see if you'll step forward or pull back. That moment is the real test, the one people never talk about, because it's invisible, unglamorous, uncomfortable, and absolutely terrifying. Most people live their lives pretending tests come with instructions, with guidance, with a map showing where to step and where to fall. But life doesn't work like that. The real test isn't in what everyone else sees. The real test isn't in the applause or the condemnation. It's in that private second when your hands tremble, your mind races, and your heart whispers something you'd rather ignore. You might think strength is about muscles, about courage, about action, but real strength is that quiet resistance, that inner hesitation that asks, do I really want to go down this path? Do I really want to make this choice? Most people avoid that question. They rush past it with bravado, pretending uncertainty doesn't exist. They cover it up with jokes, with confidence, with denial. But the truth is staring them right in the face. That tiny, trembling flicker of doubt, that's the universe's test. That's the moment where your character, your fate, your destiny all hang by a thread. Here's the cruel joke. People are convinced they can outrun that moment. They think a distraction, a lie, a rationalization will carry them past it. But the moment before the bad choice doesn't care about your excuses. It doesn't bend to your logic or your charm. It doesn't get intimidated by your denial. That second is relentless, patient, watching every twitch of your mind and every quiver in your resolve. It measures you. It counts every hesitation and every reckless impulse, and it decides whether you'll walk away unbroken or whether the consequences are about to wrap around you like a snake, tight and inevitable. And isn't it fascinating how people underestimate the weight of that moment? They brush it off, thinking, I can handle it, I know what I'm doing, I'm smarter than the warning signs. They convince themselves that the pull of temptation, of rebellion, of desire is worth the risk. They tell themselves the thrill, the power, the satisfaction will outweigh the pain, the danger, the regret. But that moment before the choice has seen it all before. It knows the exact second. You'll falter, the exact point where the charm of just this once becomes a trap. It doesn't care about your narrative. It doesn't care about your dreams. It only cares about truth. And the truth is brutal, patient, merciless. People like to romanticize risk, thinking there's glory in walking into fire and emerging unscathed. But most of the time, there's no glory, only aftermath, only reflection, only the stark realization that the thrill of the moment was nothing compared to the weight of the consequences. That moment before a bad choice is when reality hits you hard, and most people are blind to it. They smile, they laugh, they feel invincible, and they ignore the trembling in their own soul that says, stop, turn around, this isn't your fight to win. You see, tests don't always come in public. They often come in private, in the quiet spaces where no one is watching, where your own conscience has to wrestle with itself, and the ones who pass aren't necessarily the smartest or the strongest. They're the ones who hear that inner alarm, who see the danger clearly, who recognize the edge without needing someone to point it out. They pause, they hesitate, they take responsibility for the chaos waiting just beyond the threshold. And that hesitation, it feels small, insignificant, almost pathetic, but it's the birth of strength, because in that trembling second, the choice becomes yours, and only yours, and the consequences have to follow the path you decide to take. The cruel, beautiful truth is that most people fail this test repeatedly without ever noticing. They act first, think later, and then are surprised when life responds with force, with punishment, with the unmistakable echo of every reckless step. That moment before the bad choice, the one people call doubt, hesitation, fear, is actually a signpost, a mirror, a secret measure of their courage, wisdom, and clarity. Ignore it and you stumble. Listen to it and you might survive. But surviving isn't about winning. It's about understanding that the real challenge was never the action itself. It was the confrontation with yourself, the unflinching stare at the chaos you were about to unleash, and the choice to step back or step forward anyway not. Every intervention comes wrapped in light. Not every warning comes dressed in velvet or gold or anything that makes it easy to swallow. Most of the time it comes ugly, it comes inconvenient. It comes wearing the clothes of consequence, dressed as irritation, dressed as punishment, dressed as that sinking feeling you get when you know you've stepped just a little too far. People like neat stories. They like heroes and villains, beginnings and endings, reasons and resolutions. But real intervention doesn't care about your narrative. It doesn't care about your sense of justice. It doesn't arrive with a friendly knock on the door or a gentle tap on the shoulder. It shows up raw and messy and absolutely undeniable. Imagine standing at a crossroads, thinking you're clever enough to slip past the trap, thinking you're strong enough to ignore the signs. And then something hits you, not a hand from heaven, not a sign from the stars, but a collision of reality, a law you forgot, a friend who calls out the truth, a gut feeling that screams and shakes your bones. That's intervention in its purest form. Not polite, not pretty, not easy to rationalize, but impossible to ignore. And isn't it funny how people reject it, how they twist it into punishment, misfortune, or bad luck, instead of seeing it as a lifeline thrown at the perfect tee. Even if it looks like anything but. People want intervention to be beautiful because that's easier to accept. But the universe doesn't cater to comfort. It doesn't care if you enjoy the process. If it wanted to, it could wrap every warning in music and light, sprinkle it with hope and validation, make you feel safe and heroic for listening. But it doesn't. Instead, it sends the message disguised as something you hate, something you resist, something that shakes your bones and rattles your mind and makes you question every choice you've made to get here. That's the brilliance of it. That's the honesty of it. Because when you finally recognize the intervention hiding in the inconvenient, you see the truth, that voice, that warning, that consequence. You were never alone in this, and the help was there all along, just not how you expected. And yet people ignore it. They clutch their pride. They shout at the world, rail against authority, call it unfair, call it cruel, call it a trap designed to humiliate them. They miss the point entirely. Intervention isn't about control. It's about opportunity. It's about giving you a chance to see clearly, to step back, to avoid the fire that already licking at the edges of your life. But the irony is perfect. People reject the thing that could save them because it doesn't look like salvation. It looks like trouble. It feels like threat. It stings, it scratches, it bites. And yet that sting, that bite, that discomfort, that is the very thing meant to redirect you, to stop you before you fall too far, to prevent you from losing more than you realize you could afford. People think they want guidance, but what they really want is approval. They want the world to nod and smile and say, yes, keep going, you're fine. They don't want the sharp elbow in the ribs, the warning shot across the bow, the uncomfortable shake in their consciousness that says, stop, think, turn around. And the tragedy, the delicious dark irony of it, is that those sharp, inconvenient interventions are exactly what they need to survive. They're not meant to punish. They're meant to save. And the moment you recognize that, the moment you let the discomfort in, the moment you lean into it instead of recoiling, you start to understand the real architecture of the world. It's not about what you want, it's about what you need to avoid destroying yourself. Completely. Think about the last time life shoved you sideways, the last time you stumbled into something unexpected, the last time someone or something forced you to pause, reconsider, step back. You probably hated it. You probably cursed it. You probably swore it was unfair, but deep down, maybe hidden under a layer of irritation, frustration, anger, you knew it saved you from a step you couldn't take without breaking, from a choice that would have consumed you, from a path you weren't ready to survive. That's intervention at its purest, unpolished, ugly, inconvenient, relentless. It doesn't care if you like it. It doesn't care if it fits your narrative. It only cares that you see it, that you understand it, that you have the chance to use it before it's too late. People resist it because it's uncomfortable, because it exposes weaknesses, because it demands honesty. And that discomfort is the secret ingredient, the cruel brilliance, the necessary sting. Intervention that's easy to accept wouldn't teach you anything. The ones that shake you, that make you doubt yourself, that rattle the foundations you've built, that's the real gift. That's the thing people mistake for punishment. But it's the only thing capable of pulling them back from the edge they're too blind to see. And so the world keeps nudging, keeps pushing, keeps shaking people awake in ways they refuse to recognize, because sometimes salvation doesn't arrive gently, and the only way to notice it is to bleed a little, stumble a little, and pay attention to the bite that wakes you up. Being stopped isn't always punishment. People like to think it is. They see red tape, rules, handcuffs, warnings, obstacles, and they scream injustice. They stomp their feet, throw tantrums, curse the world, blame anyone and everyone but themselves, as if the universe was supposed to hand them a very important person passed to destruction with no consequences. But being stopped, really stopped, isn't about punishment. It's about intervention, about timing, about the world, life, whatever you want to call it, saying, not yet, not like this, not this way. And people hate that. They hate that because it strips away the illusion that they are in control, that they are clever enough to dance through fire and emerge unscathed. But the universe doesn't play for applause. It plays for survival. And sometimes survival is inconvenient, messy, and abrupt. Think about the last time you were stopped. Maybe it was a law, maybe it was someone telling you the truth, maybe it was a gut feeling gnawing at your chest that said, this isn't the way. Your first instinct? Fight it, ignore it, explain it away. Most people can't resist the urge to rebel, to push against the walls before realizing the walls exist for a reason, and that's exactly the moment you're being protected. That's exactly the moment when the invisible hand, the silent force, whatever you want to call it, pulls you back from the edge before your foot slips. And people never notice it, they never appreciate it. They just feel the sting of friction, the irritation of being restrained, the humiliation of not getting what they thought they were owed, and they call it unfair, cruel, undeserved. They mistake rescue for punishment because the timing is inconvenient, because it hurts their ego, because they can't see the truth hidden inside the sharpness of the moment. It's always the inconvenient stops that matter most. Not the gentle nudges, not the signs you can ignore without consequence, not the soft little hints you can pretend didn't exist. No, the stops that make you stumble, that make your heart race, that force you to reconsider your path, those are the ones that are real. Those are the ones that save lives, they save futures. They save the pieces of you that you might destroy in your own arrogance, in your own blindness. And it's beautiful, in a dark, twisted way, because the universe doesn't need your gratitude. It doesn't ask for thanks. It just pulls you back when you're about to walk over the edge and lets you wonder why, lets you curse the timing, lets you squirm in discomfort. That's the brilliance of being stopped. It's a rescue disguised as inconvenience. An act of mercy disguised as punishment. People love to pretend they can handle everything, that they can run faster than consequences, that they can outrun warnings. And most of the time they can't. They're weak, fragile, impulsive, and full of pride. They think rules are shackles, restrictions are insults, and pauses in their path are humiliations. But the universe isn't trying to humiliate. It's trying to preserve, protect, redirect. When you hit a stop, when the hand comes down, when the law, the consequence, the instinct, the gut feeling halts your motion, that's not the end of the story. That's the chapter where you're given a choice, a chance, an opportunity to recognize that walking forward without caution would have led to ruin. And most people are blind to it. They see the stop as an obstacle to their desires, rather than a safeguard for their survival. The cruel, ironic truth is that people often fight the very thing that's saving them. They rail against the interruption, curse the rules, argue, plead, rationalize, try to escape the pause that keeps them from disaster. And the universe? It doesn't retaliate. It doesn't yell. It doesn't scold. It simply waits, patiently, watching to see if you'll notice, if you'll finally understand that the stop was never the enemy, that the stop, in its inconvenient, uncomfortable, abrupt glory, was the thing that kept you whole when you were about to fracture, that prevented you from stepping into chaos you weren't ready to survive. People never see it, they never thank it. They just grit their teeth and push against it, failing to realize that being stopped is sometimes the clearest form of guidance, the most brutal form of protection, the only way the world could speak loudly enough to be heard over the noise of their own arrogance. And when you finally do notice, when you pause, when you consider, when you realize the timing wasn't coincidence, the restriction wasn't random, the stop wasn't punishment, you begin to understand a little about the dark poetry of life. You understand that the universe doesn't need your compliance or gratitude to do its work. You understand that your destruction isn't inevitable, but your attention, your awareness, your willingness to recognize the invisible force, that is what determines whether you survive or fall. Being stopped isn't a wall, it's a lifeline, a chance, a pause long enough to reconsider before the consequences arrive, merciless and unforgiving, and remind you that you aren't as untouchable as you thought. The world has a way of tightening its grip just when you think you're free. People love to believe they have all the space they need, that their choices are theirs alone, that the edges of consequence are something that happened to other people, not them. But reality has other plans. Life, the universe, whatever you want to call it, doesn't wait for you to be ready. It doesn't care about your timing, your excuses, your clever plans. When you drift too close to danger, when your pride pushes you towards something you weren't built to handle, that grip comes down like a hand from nowhere, and most people don't even notice until it's tight around their wrists, their ankles, their throat, their mind. It's subtle at first, just a new DGE, a pressure, a feeling in your chest that something isn't right. And if you ignore it, it becomes impossible to ignore. That's the beauty, the cruelty, the precision of it. The universe doesn't negotiate, it doesn't compromise, it doesn't plead, it tightens its grip, and suddenly the choices you thought were yours feel smaller, constrained, limited, and you begin to realize that freedom has limits, always has, and sometimes the limits appear just in time to save you from yourself. You see, humans think they're clever. They think they can bend reality, slip past rules, outsmart systems, outrun warnings, dodge consequences. They think they are untouchable, that chaos will dance around them politely, that danger will politely wait for another day. And that's the trap. The universe doesn't tiptoe, it doesn't hesitate. It waits until you're exposed, until the moment of reckoning is near, and then the grip comes down, not to punish, not to humiliate, but to contain, to prevent, to redirect. And people fight it at first. They curse it, scream at it, struggle against it, convinced that freedom is being taken away. But they fail to see that freedom without limits is chaos. That grip you feel tightening, that pressure, that invisible hand, is sometimes the only thing between you and absolute disaster. Think about it. How many times have people walked through life imagining there are no walls, imagining the universe is a playground where consequences are optional, where boundaries are suggestions, where risk is only a thrill, not a threat. And when the consequences finally arrive, when reality finally slams into them, they are shocked. Why me? They cry. Why now? They wail. But the answer was there all along, waiting, quiet, subtle, patient, invisible to pride and arrogance. That tightening grip is the universe's way of saying, not yet, not like this, not this way. It's the voice of reality reminding you that your actions have weight, that your choices have consequences, that your freedom is not infinite, and your life is not a sandbox. And the strangest part is that people often only notice the grip once it's strong enough to hurt. Until then, it's subtle. A whisper of doubt, a feeling of unease, a hesitation in the gut. They ignore it, rationalize it, push it aside, thinking, I can handle it, I'm fine. And then suddenly, the grip is undeniable. Suddenly, the walls are closing in. Suddenly, the moment of reckoning is pressing on you like a fist. And it's terrifying, disorienting, suffocating. Because for so long you believed in your own invincibility, your own control, your own cleverness, and reality is laughing at you, tightening the grip just to make the point crystal clear. There's no debate, no compromise, no escape from the consequences that have been forming quietly, patiently, waiting for the precise moment when you'd realize, too late, that freedom isn't freedom, that chaos isn't fun, that the edge you were flirting with isn't yours to dance on. Most people recoil, fight, resist, lash out, pretending they can break the grip, but the grip doesn't yield to tantrums, to rage, to arrogance. It doesn't care about your complaints. It only cares that you notice, that you acknowledge, that you understand the simple, brutal truth. Unchecked, untamed behavior always meets resistance. The tighter the grip, the closer you were to disaster. And the grip is merciful in a dark, twisted way. It stops you before you fall. It restrains you before you break. It intervenes in the most uncomfortable, unwelcome, unavoidable manner because subtle warning. G's are easy to ignore, but consequences are loud, inescapable, and immediate. And sometimes that's the only way to get through to people who refuse to listen, who refuse to see, who refuse to believe that life isn't a toy, and freedom isn't permission to destroy yourself. Accountability is a strange thing, isn't it? People talk about it like it's a moral obligation, like it's some polite way to live.